Hello and what is up, everyone? Welcome back. As you can see, I have a slightly new setup right now. Today we're just going to go into using Python for making web requests. So normally we make web requests through a browser or through an application, but today I'm going to show you how to just through Python and whatever code editor you want. Today we're just going to be using idle, how to actually send a request to a website and deal with the actual response back. So yeah, let's get into it. So here you can see I've opened up idle. On the left, I have the shell open, and on the right, I've got a file which is going to contain all of the example code. So the library that we're going to be using is called requests. I'll leave a link to the website and the docs in the description. So first what we're going to have to do is, I've already done it, but at the top I have a command that you would run to install the library with pip. I'm using Python 3, so I have pip3 install requests. And then the first line that we're going to want in our actual file, not the commented out line, is the import requests. So the file knows to bring in that library. So you can see that the first thing that I do is I call requests.get, and then we type in https://www.google.com, and we're saving that into a variable called response. So what this is going to do is it's going to make a call to google.com, and it's going to save the response into that variable response. And when we print out that response object, you can see in the shell, we get a weird thing that just prints out response 200. So the 200 indicates that we had a successful response. So in HTTP, that there are a set of status response codes, and any code that starts with a 2, so in like the 200 range, means that it was a successful response. So we see response 200. That means the website is up and running and we got a successful response back. So let's comment out that print statement now, and let's actually look at the different fields within that response object so we can get a little more information than just response 200. Let's see what the information actually is that we're getting from google.com. So if we go ahead and uncomment out this first print statement, where we just say print and then we access the response.text property of the response object, you can see we actually get a whole bunch of stuff. And so this is actually what is being sent from google.com to our as a response to our request. You can actually see that there's a bunch of like divs and h2s and href and css all in line. So this is actually what would show up in your browser. Your browser basically uses the css and html and knows how to format that to give you like that beautiful Google homepage. But when we actually just request it from this library, it just gives us a text version of this, and that's why it looks like this huge jumbled mess. So you can see this is actually an HTML document, and it doesn't really do us much good in this form. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and change the URL that we're trying to get from google.com, which as you can see is pretty complicated, to just a simple site, example.com. And here you can see it's much easier to read. You can see the CSS and the HTML, and it's just an easier example to work with. So let's go ahead and uncomment all of these different fields that I'm going to show you guys. So if we comment out the response.text and uncomment the different fields like response.statuscode, response.url, response.isRedirect, and response.headers, and response.elapsed, we can see that the request comes back and we have all of those different fields. And so, like I said, the response.status code is a quick way for users to understand what the result of the response was, what the status of it was. So like I said, 200 is a class of successful responses. The URL is just the URL that we requested. IsRedirect tells us if our request was actually by the remote server redirected, and so the original page that we requested wasn't the page that we got. The server has some logic to redirect us to a different page. So here it says false for IsRedirect, so that means we weren't redirected. So response.headers, that will be the basically it's a dictionary of headers added to the response object. So when we send a request, there are headers in that request, and the actual server sends headers in the response as well. So you can go ahead and check those out. And then response.elapsed is the time it took for the server to respond to our request. So those are just a couple of the fields of this response object for our GET request. With the request library, we can also send requests of different HTTP verbs. So the first one was a GET. So if we were to make a POST object, you can see the URL, we're just setting it to example.com, and you can see we have object spelled incorrectly, and basically what this is this is the data that we're going to be sending with a POST request. So a GET request is just a request to go out and fetch data. So we're just asking our remote server, hey, give us the data at this location, or give us this page, and it does that. But with a POST, we're saying, hey, here's some data, do something with it, and then give me a response. So this is just an example of what you could do with a POST request. You'd create an object. Here we just send a username, which is John Smith, and then an age, which is 23. And then we call request.post to the URL, and then we send another parameter called data of obj. That actually should read object, or the incorrect object. And then once we send that, it will hit the example.com post URL, and it will send the data that we've also added to this post request. So example.com doesn't actually accept post requests, but for a URL that you would send a post request to, this is how it would work. This is just meant to serve as an example. So the second part doesn't actually work. So another thing that we can do to our requests is we can actually set our custom headers to go onto the request object that we're sending to the remote server. So here what we do is we just set a new variable called custom headers to a dictionary, because that's what headers are. They're dictionaries, key value pairs. And we're here just simulating sending like an API key, for example, in case that's something that would be needed by this API that we're trying to hit. So we just add it as another parameter into the post method, and it's named headers, and then we pass in our variable custom headers, and that will get added to the request that gets sent. Contents from a remote server, which is really, really cool. That's one of the things that's so great about Python, is that in just like 30 seconds, you could figure out how to do this and just start like getting stuff off the ground without having a bunch of boilerplate code. And then I'll actually add a link to some documentation around different HTTP verbs, so you can learn about that more if you're interested. So yeah, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.